Hi, everybody. I thought I would do a message to you today introducing the class I'm going to start teaching next week, which is called The Courageous Journey of Inner Space. And it's a class in which, once again, I'll be teaching about Teresa of Avila. And this time I'm going to be combining it with a little bit on the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, but I wanted to introduce why I'm teaching this class and include, I guess, a little bit of background on my own spiritual life, which is for me, not the most comfortable thing to do, but um, it's probably a little bit appropriate here. Let me begin by saying that I'm doing this course because of my deep devotion to the mystical teachings of not just Teresa of Avila, but all the mystics. And why do I have this deep devotion? And why would you even be interested in that? But I'm just going to share that. My feeling, my belief has come from these years and years of my own inner spiritual evolution, what I believe, what I'm going to emphasize in these teachings. I'm going to share that with you, and then I'm going to give you a background of how I've come to this. The emphasis that I'm going to place on in the classes that I'll teach during June is that I've spent years now really immersed in the nature of our health, in the nature of our spiritual health, our psychic health, our bio-spiritual ecology. And I've come to believe that we've reached the foothills of the era of the soul, not in a spirit, not in a religious way, but in a organic divinity way. And that the perceptual fields that are opening around us have so much to do with the awakening of the anatomy of the soul, this texturous domain within us that is mystical territory. We are now asking questions that are, by their very nature, mystical prayers, like, for what reason have I been born? What is the purpose of my life? These are not ordinary questions. Who do you think is supposed to answer that? You're asking, as in the prayer, take me down deep and reveal to me the reason you've given me life. These are much deeper questions. It's been my observation that we suffer differently. The depth to which we now engage in inner pursuits has opened up passages in us that lead to spiritual crises, dark nights of the soul in people that are not ordinary crises anymore. They are spiritual in nature, not religious, but spiritual crises of the soul. And the mystics, they knew about this territory. That is their territory. And I believe deeply that without their rich material as an ally, that finding your way through the caverns you're opening up in yourself, you're hard pressed to process a lot of what's opening up. As the world becomes more chaotic on the outside, it is a statement of how chaotic we're becoming on the inside. And they offer us incredibly rich resources. The mystical life today is not as it was, I think, centuries ago, when the renowned great mystics that established names for themselves, and thus monasteries or religious orders became so famous. And mystical experiences, I think, are happening in ways that are far more organic to our ordinary lives. My own life has been redirected, and I thought I would share a little bit about that, encouraged by somebody I love very deeply and I trust very much, who said that I should explain why I refer to Teresa of Avila as my Teresa. And this person is right. I suppose I should do that because I did not realize that I'd taken a sort of possessive feeling about her, which I do have, and I suppose I should say something about that. So, and it's not the most comfortable thing for me to share this part, but because I now have devoted my life to teaching you about the interior life that I am now encouraging you to pursue, I suppose it is a bit of integrity for me to share something about this. And I thought about, where do I begin? What do I share? Where do I begin? And I thought I would just tell the story of how Anatomy of the Spirit came to be born, because in a sense that was a hallmark mystical experience for me, and because I think many of you are probably familiar with that book. When I got the contract for that book, it came after my doing the audio version of Energy Anatomy, which came during the height of my work as a medical intuitive. Now, I have a lot of quirks. I have so many oddnesses. Even I can't handle them. But one of them is that once I teach something, once I drain myself of a bank account of knowledge, it's gone. I don't have the enthusiasm for. I have to move on. Which is why I did medical intuition, and then I did sacred contracts, and now I'm into. It's gone, and my animation to teach it is gone. Once I recorded Energy Anatomy and then Advanced Energy Anatomy, it was gone. The problem was I had gotten my first major book contract for Energy Anatomy out of Random House. And when I sat down to write it, it was gone. It wasn't that I didn't know the material anymore. Of course I knew it. But animation, for me, is like I can feel the grace. I can feel that assistance. I can feel it. I can just feel it. I have always had to live alone. I'd always have to be alone because that world is more real to me, more present. There's no way for me to communicate that to you other than to say it. And I have protected this part of my life and lived it fully. And so I could not feel it. And when I would write, it would be garbage. And so it set me into a crisis. And I kept having to send my editor notes. Well, I need more time. And I had a major contract, and she didn't know me. And eventually I became ill. I developed this raging sinus infection, and it went on. And I was really scared, and I didn't know what to do. Months went by, months. I had to get an extension for a book I couldn't write. And when you think of yourself as an author, and I knew in my gut that this book was not going to happen, because I could feel it. You know what it's like? It's like being in a delivery room and everyone's telling you to push, but you're not pregnant. So I then go to teach a workshop with my dear and wondrous friend Norm Shealy. And we're teaching this workshop, and it's on energy anatomy. And I'm standing at the end of the classroom, and at the other end of the classroom is a blank, what would you call those things? Um, whiteboard. And I'm about to walk across the room and draw 7 chakras, 7 circles. And I stood there, and all of a sudden, what downloaded into me completely, just boom, downloaded, was energy anatomy. Boom, I'm looking at this whiteboard, and all of a sudden I understood in what Teresa of Avila would call an intellectual revelation. I saw the 7 chakras and the 7 sacraments and the tree of life moving organically into our biospiritual anatomy. I saw it. I understood, not visually. I got it. I understood. I just, boom, I got it. And I literally walked out of the classroom, went downstairs to an office in Norm's building, and called my editor. And I said, I'm changing the book. This is what I want to write. This is the book. And she paused for a moment, and she said, okay, do it. And energy anatomy, anatomy of the spirit was born. I cannot communicate to you the wonder of that moment to me. The wonder of going from not knowing something to being swept up into another way of understanding us like that, and the depth of it. Well, that took hold of my life for the next several years. But the experience of receiving something like that was also something that I have returned to again and again and again and again. And it happened again when I started to wonder about why people didn't heal. Why people didn't heal. How come people feared healing? And you see, the whole progress for me became what's inside of us. Where did this come from? The chakra system, the sacraments, we seem to be wired so fantastically in the invisible, in our bio-spiritual nature. It became this wonderment to me. How could it not be? It was as if I was ushered in and said, look at this, look. Then, and I never had an interest in healing. One day, I had an interest in healing. It just happened. I wondered not about healing because I never felt qualified to do that. I have no background in healing. I went the other way. I thought, why would you not want to be whole? Why would you not want that? Why are you sabotaging becoming whole? Why are you using wounds to manipulate people? Why are you sabotaging yourself? And as I observed this one person doing that, I wondered, why would a human being do this? And all of a sudden, I got it, that in fact, the journey of life is a journey of power. How we manage our power. And that shifted everything for me. Just like that. And I started to realize that power was the fundamental ingredient of the human experience. But what was that power? What is the essence of that? And I had to know. I had to know. I had to know more. That power comes from someplace. What is it? It's more than our mind, for God's sake, for heaven's sake. It was the essence of our life. Our life is about the management of this creative force that is housed within our form, our body. eventually, I don't have time to go into all the years of my life, but eventually, everything that I had done felt inadequate. It just felt inadequate. And then I started to wonder about healing. From why we didn't heal, I figured that out, to what about healing? What can we heal? What can this force in us do? What are the parameters of our soul? What is grace? What is this world? What is our world? What's the texture in us? What is that? That's when I started to rethink mystical literature. Specifically, I thought, maybe I'll look at Ignatius Loyola, maybe because I was educated in a Jesuit graduate school, and I thought, well, maybe I'll go and look at, John of the Cross, because I hear so, but the one that I knew least about was Teresa of Avila. And I thought the reason I looked at her was because someone had mentioned, Matt Fox, a professor of mine, had mentioned that she wrote about the interior castle, and she made mention that it had 7. She described the soul as having 7 mansions, and I thought, 7 chakras, 7 mansions. So I thought, all right, so I'm going to teach this workshop on her. Not on her, on the mystics, Christian mystics in the morning, Eastern mystics in the afternoon. I thought I would do, the Eastern traditions in the afternoon. And in that morning, I had scheduled myself to teach the ones I knew the best, that I'd actually studied. And I hadn't, the only thing I looked at was the 7 mansions. Like, all right, 1, 2, 3. Okay, very fast. But the others I knew. I accidentally grabbed Teresa's book first. And I thought, no big deal. I sit down on my stool. I always teach on a bar stool. And I should back up. I forgot something. I was writing Invisible Acts of Power, and prior to writing that, I had this other experience. I was standing in my kitchen, and I was living in a townhouse at the time, so we're going back 17 years. And I was living in a townhouse, and I'm standing in my kitchen, and I'm thinking to myself, and this is so typical of heaven. I was standing in my kitchen, and I'm thinking to myself, I love my life. I just love my life. I love it. And it was a Friday afternoon. It was my perfect. I love Friday afternoons the most. And it was a gorgeous October Friday afternoon. The temperature was perfect. Everything was perfect. And I hear a message. And it says, you don't have a prayer life. And it was so clear and so not me. It was so clear that I talked to it, and I looked around the room, and it's very difficult to describe messenger voices. They are not loud, but they're loud. They're not you, but they're clearly meant for you. And I started talking to it, and I said, who's talking to it? And I said, what are you talking about? And this is where my Catholic background comes in. I knew what I knew. I knew I had just received a message. I knew that I was just told my life was going to change. there's no way for me to communicate all that I knew in that moment. I knew that everything I had done was just getting deanimated, that all my teaching with sacred contract was going to stop. I knew that I was in for a new life path. There's no way that I can communicate how much I knew was going to change. I was being told, you are going to need a prayer life. And I stood there bargaining. I said, but I teach all these people and I try and do good things and I'm teaching religion and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. I knew none of that made any difference. I knew that I was being told, you're going down deep inside of yourself and that's it. You have no idea what I know that I knew. And then I turn around and I dismiss it. You know what I mean? Not dismiss, but I was in wonder. I thought, this is incredible. You actually care that I don't pray and the way I'm supposed to, the way you want me to, the way I should understand prayer. And then I thought, oh Christ, am I in for it? And then I thought, this is incredible. Both are true. The way I would put it today is that my soul went into ecstasy, but the rest of me went into terror. Okay, so what happens? I was writing Invisible Acts of Power at the time. God, I hope you're interested in all this because I'm just rambling. And I decided to add scripture references to it. And the reason was because as I was putting that book together, I realized that the stories people were sharing with me were incredible stories of divine intervention. And I thought, this is just like I've read in the Old Testament, the New Testament, the holy books. And I thought, I just need to add a little of this and that. And one day, while I was reading all these wondrous stories people shared, I thought, why are these stories so alive to me? And I realized they were stories of like living scriptures and grace. And I thought, I went into this deep state of all I could say is prayer and said, you really are everywhere. And bingo, I had a grand mal seizure, out cold. And when I came out on the floor of my office, I had this feeling, oh my God, what are you doing? What are you doing? Okay, I'm not going to go into all the rest then. Now I'm in that workshop. I grabbed this book to teach Teresa, and it's Teresa of Avila. I meant to begin with John of the Cross, and I thought, no big deal. But then I felt this blackness start that I had felt that day of the seizure in my office, and I thought I was going to have a seizure on stage. And I looked, and I thought, if I fall, I'm going to break my neck. And I froze. I just froze. I thought, but I didn't. And what happened was, I heard a voice, and it said, daughter, follow me. And I perked up, and I thought it was speaking to me. And I knew it was Teresa of Avila. What then followed was that whole weekend, I taught her work as if I was a scholar. I forgot about Ignatius. I forgot about John. I forgot about all the Eastern mystics. I simply taught Teresa of Avila as if I knew and understood her work, as if I'd studied it, as if, and here's the thing. I remember observing myself teaching, thinking, where's this coming from? Where's this coming? But I knew her work. I knew it, and I loved it. And it just poured into me. I loved every word of it. I loved it. I cannot tell you how much I loved it. It was wondrous to me. Well, I was writing another book at the time. When I got home that weekend, I deleted everything I had been working on for 9 months. Threw it out, threw out everything. Who throws out a book, right? And then I called my editor, bless her soul, and said, you know, that book we were working on, we have this huge contract for. I said, I threw it out. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the work of Teresa of Avila and I'm going to bring it into modern times, because I think people need to know the anatomy of their spirit. I think of their soul. I think they need to understand the mystical journey in a modern way. I think they are living the mystical journey in a modern way, and they need to recognize it in modern contemporary language. And that's what we're going to do. And then I explained to her that I had a mystical experience with Teresa. And you know how crazy that sounds, but it didn't to me. So she paused, and then she said, you tell that saint of yours, you've got a 6-month deadline. And she hung up the phone. I'll never forget that. Now, Monday morning, which was the next morning, I sat in my kitchen and I thought, what have you done? What have you done? What have you been through? What have you done? And you know what happened? I get a card in the mail. I don't know from whom. From England, right? Right. And in it is this card. Wait a minute. There. This bookmarker, which I've now laminated from someone who I don't know. And I'm reading the back. Here's the back. And it says, Caroline, I am praying for your health and protection each day. May God guide you with every step with love and prayers. I don't recognize the name. I couldn't even, I said, is it Lorette? Is this, I don't know. And it says, thank you so much. And on the bottom, right here, it says Carmelite Monastery. Teresa was a Carmelite. As if that wasn't enough, here is the message. Let nothing disturb you. God alone suffices. Saint Teresa of Avila. That was it. That was my beginning of a bond with faith in a saint. I should do a whole thing with you on faith in a saint and faith, period. But that began an extraordinary 6 months for me, which I won't go into now. But I will refer to it in the series, which is not a tease, by the way. We just don't have time. But you don't change your life for imagination. Maybe some people do. I'm not that way. I'm a very grounded person, believe it or not. And God gave me a very grounded nature and a very mystical life. But what I do know, as the years have gone by, is that the teachings of these mystics offer us a profound doorway into the depths of ourselves. As the world has changed so much and we are leaving traditions and familiar territory everywhere, familiar territory of our nation, of our finances, of our what the pandemic is changing, as we're leaving everything familiar of our religions, of our family structures, of our sexuality, of everything. It has created crises, I think, deeper than we are able to articulate. But it is also driving us into the depth of ourselves where we have to navigate and understand the nature of our power, the power we have to be resilient, the power that we do have to create, manage our reality, our health, the construct of this world we live in, and that power is ultimately sacred. It is a sacred force. It's not a psychic one. It's not a mental one. It goes through those stages. But ultimately, that force, as you plow through what Teresa calls the journey of self-knowledge, you eventually recognize this is not ordinary power. I could keep it at that level. I could. If I keep it at that level, I'll be forced to use force. But I can refine it to resource, to something deeper. That's where I want to take you in this next series of my mystical spring that is now spilling into a mystical summer, will eventually spill into a mystical autumn. But that's why I'm so devoted to this. I so believe in you. I believe in the power of what we're made of, where we're going, and in the sacred guidance that surrounds all of you. So I thought I would leave this with this wondrous, wondrous prayer. Let me see if I can find it. It's a bit long, but it's so beautiful. Listen to this. Blowing through the heaven and earth, and in our hearts and in the heart of every living being is a gigantic breath, a great cry, which we call God. Plant life wished to continue its motionless sleep next to stagnant waters, but the cry leaped up within it and violently shook its roots. Away, let go of the earth, walk. Had the tree been able to think and judge, it would have cried, I don't want to. What are you urging me to do? You are demanding the impossible. But the cry, without pity, kept shaking its roots, shouting, away, let go of the earth, walk. It shouted in this way for thousands of eons, and lo, as a result of desire and struggle, life escaped the motionless tree and was liberated. Animals appeared, worms making themselves at home in mud and water. We're just fine, they said. We have peace and security, and we're not budging. But the terrible cry hammered itself pitilessly into their loins. Leave the mud, stand up, give birth to your betters. We don't want to. We can't stand. You can't stand, but I can. Stand up. And lo, after thousands of eons, man emerged, trembling on his still unsolid legs. The human being is a centaur. His equine hoofs are planted in the ground, but the body from breast to head is worked on and tormented by the merciless cry. He's been fighting, again for thousands of eons, to draw himself out of this animalistic scabbard. He's also fighting, and this is his new struggle, to draw himself out of his scabbard. Man cries in despair, where can I go? I've reached the pinnacle beyond the abyss, and the cry answers, I am beyond. Stand up. That's from Nicholas Katsantzakis. Okay, everybody, I hope you'll join me next week as I begin my class on June 8th, and I bid you all blessings. Thank you.